Brian Johnson is the co-founder of Bethel Music, singer and songwriter. He thought he was having a heart attack, but it turned out to be a panic attack.
When the ambulance got there, this one thought crossed my mind, even though I was in the middle of this thing. I walked over to my kids, and I told my kids, I said, this is, I said, this is when God becomes real.
In his book, When God Becomes Real, Brian opens up about his battle with anxiety and depression. He shares how God helped him find freedom and how the Lord wants to do the same for you.
Well, Brian Johnson is here with us now, and Brian, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Your battle with anxiety actually began when you were young.
Yeah.
You know, age 7, you started to notice things. What was happening to you?
You know, as a 7-year-old, you have no idea, right, what's happening. I mean, outside playing with lizards, and the next day I can't breathe. I'm having panic attacks. And back then, I felt like it was more spiritual, and that I was so petrified that I had a demon. You know, and I'd seen deliverance, and in our church, deliverance wasn't a big deal. I mean, it wasn't screaming. It was like gentle, but at the same time, I was so petrified, and I would spiral into these panic attacks. And it lasted up until I was about 21 years old, off and on. I slept with my parents almost every night till I was 18. That's how intense it was in different seasons, which is crazy.
Did you have it in your head that somehow a demon was attacking you? Was that,
you know,
did that make it worse?
Of course it made it worse. You know, if my hair on the back of my neck would stand up. And but my dad taught me about the power of praise, and we'd stay up sometimes all night, and sometimes it'd break in 5 minutes. But every time we'd start just singing, you know, the old songs, We Exalt Thee, all that stuff. I love you, Lord. And every single time it worked. And so the priority of praise was there as a 7-year-old. And I started playing guitar, and then it kind of all made sense.
What is it about praise that I call it the neglected, you know, weapon of warfare? I mean, what is it about it that frees people, that sets you free, that just literally changes the atmosphere around you?
It's a landscape changer. It's, you know, that verse, God habits the praises of his people. It's a real thing. You know, it's not just a thought. It's not mind over matter. I think it's a real thing. You know, the Jericho, the wall fell with that shout of praise. And, you know, we've done ministry where you're just playing in the streets, you know, over people and just watching their world go into peace. And praying for a girl the other night who was really going through it. And just, you know, there's something about the praise that brings the presence of God, you know. And when he's present, the word impossible doesn't exist. And so it's really that simple. It's hard to wrap our minds around it, but it's a real thing, you know.
Now, you're the son of pastors, and so what did that do to this equation?
You know, I never had a stigma or a thing being a PK. My parents have been amazing. They're like the perfect pastors in that they guarded us, but at the same time they protected us. They let us kind of get whatever haircut we wanted. They weren't religious in a really good way. We were very familiar with spirit stuff, you know, familiar with people getting prayed for that had demons or that needed healing or whatever. So I feel like it was a good thing, but at the same time, like you said before, the thought that could be me was always, you know, tormented me a bit.
But doesn't even the concept of perfect create another problem? That if my parents are perfect, then what's going on with me?
Yeah, I think that you probably always have that question in the back of your mind, you know, as a PK, maybe whether you admit it or not. But I did, when you get into that swirl, there's a lot of questions, you know, too many questions. That's part of the problem is you let your mind just races. So that was definitely a thing. Okay.
Well, you've gotten out of the thing. And it took you an ambulance ride to the hospital. Now, take us to that moment. What's going through your mind then?
Yeah, 21 years old to 36 years old, I had no anxiety, none of that. Well, obviously I did before 36, a few years. It was just built up. It's like if you can think of a balloon, you know, and you don't let the air out, eventually it'll pop, and that was me. I didn't even know it, didn't realize it. I took my son to the river. My wife said, once she could tell I needed some rest, take him to the river, hang out. And my arms went numb. You know, the classic, am I having a heart attack? I start getting really short of breath. My mind's really fuzzy. And I grabbed my son and got out of there quick and raced home, because it got to the point where I couldn't hardly function, which is really terrifying. Like I had no control. And I got home thinking I'd just walk it off, and it just got worse and worse. And finally the ambulance came, and I didn't know if it was 15 minutes later or 2 hours or whatever. My world was collapsing. That's all I can say. It was terrifying. And they hooked me up to an IV, and basically was sedated from then. I had a 6-month-long, period where it was just hell. It was a living hell, where every 5 minutes I was like fighting off a panic attack. And so it was an intense season where it's like, if God didn't step in, I don't know what would be going on right now with my life,
They sometimes call that a cascade moment.
Yep.
Was there a trigger that led to that?
I do. Yeah, there's lots of triggers. I think finally at the close to the end of it, we were on a drive, me and my wife, and she just started going deep with me, like asking me questions. The Holy Spirit was so gracious and pinpointed some things, which I didn't even know. Like unforgiveness in certain areas, things that she'd mention a name, and I'd be like, okay, so I'd speak it out. And by the end of that drive, it was the first time in 6 months where I thought, you say trigger, I'm like, oh, here's what's going on. And I had a glimpse of hope. And the next morning, I got up at 5:15 a.m. and started reading my Bible, and then I never stopped. And I felt like from the Lord, like some things needed to change. And it's not like I was like living in sin. It wasn't like that. It was just this thing. It was happening to me, and I didn't know why. And I had my real God moment about 7 to 10 days in of that, where I quit everything. I had no other option. It was either that or live on meds. And I got such a sense of hope in about 10 days. It was amazing. God stepped in, and within a month, I was able to get off of the meds. And for 1 year after that, I had no anxiety. It was a surreal thing. I was basically, God reached in and just delivered me, and it was pretty amazing.
Well, you say that, but you took some very concrete steps to make sure that
100%.
He could reach in.
Yeah, I had to take some serious
steps. Because a lot
steps.
of what's going on when you're having these kinds of issues or any kind of mental issues, and there's a wide variety, is you're not taking that time, either for yourself, self-care, or for God. So what do you do now?
Well, I'll tell you now, like I have to keep close tabs on it, because I live that. So the memory is there, right? And so if I start feeling something, like it would be very easy for me to spiral back down there because of the memory, but I know now what to do. So it's my mornings with God. And I think that the approach of it's different. So it's not, I know when I'm approaching my devotional time to get something out of it to give. So I feel like that has to be separate. Get up in the morning and just spend time with God. Maybe read a verse, that's it. And just meditate on it for an hour, and not doing it for something else. Because when I was broke down to the point where it was like, it was like I was on a deserted island by myself, and it was me and God, and I don't know how long it was going to be. So I just go back to that place, and worship has always been a part of that process as well. I think exposing it, having communication with people is really important. Bringing it to the light, I think, is a big deal. C.S. Lewis said a friendship starts when I look at you and I say, me too. And there's something about, oh, I experienced that same thing. And there's something in that we need. It's like we're locking arms, and I'm seeing this anxiety thing. It's crazy right now, the depression. And if we can expose it and lock arms together, I feel like that's the first step. At least it was for me.
What would you tell somebody watching right now who's going through this? What should they be doing?
Well, I'd say for sure, I mean, there's multiple things you can do, like what you said, self-care, stopping, assessing what are the triggers. I think the God equation is always a huge part of it. I think getting alone with God, and sometimes it takes a while, to get a hold of God, like it's like grabbing, it's like the woman through the crowd. She had to work, she had to take those steps to get a hold of God and to get that promise. And it is not for the faint of heart. It is hard. It took everything in me. It broke me down to the point where I felt like I was at my end, like literally. And it's just that desperation before God. The word and worship are huge. I think that verse that says the word renews our mind. I think that's not just we get an encouraging word and we talk ourselves into it. I think there's an actual healing when we just read the word.
Well, it's life.
Yeah.
His words are life.
Yep.
You've written a whole book about this, when God becomes real.
Yep.
And so here you are, raised in a Christian home,
Yep.
raised in church, and you're saying God just became real to me. What happened?
Well, obviously, I've known God's real my whole life. You know, I believed, and but it's when you're it's kind of like a friend of mine says, our prayer life changes from a list of things versus right now, and if I'm out in the ocean, drowning in the ocean, my prayer life changes in that the desperation. And only God was the one who could save me. When God became my only option, it was the greatest gift of my life. And so he became real in a whole new way, where it was like no one on the planet could talk me out of what he did for me. And there's that encounter with God that I had because of that.
So tell me about the encounter.
I had several encounters during that, when I started getting up early and reading with God, reading my Bible. And one of them was Luke 7:47. When I read the story of the woman at Jesus' feet, and Jesus said, the religious leaders are saying, how could this woman do this display? What is this whatever? And Jesus said, no, you don't understand. The reason she's able to love like this is because she's been forgiven of much. And I remember, I'll get it together.
That's all right.
I remember reading that verse. And now remember, it's not like I had lived this life of sin or anything, but I remember reading that verse and connecting with that verse in a way where I'm like, I know what that feels like. To be so broken, right? And weak. And because of that, God, this encounter, those mornings became so important to me. And God would speak to me through the word for what I needed for the day, and like that daily bread thing. Mm-hmm. And so what happened is I'd read something, and then the same day, exactly what I read. It got to the point where it was so like kind of scary, weird, but in an amazing way. What happened during the day was what I read. And it's like the Holy Spirit was teaching me not to think about 2 days or 3 days or a week, but daily. And it was in increments. Because remember, in that state, I was fighting back panic attacks every 5 minutes. So I needed that daily, that moment with God to sustain me. And it progressed into weeks and months and then so on. But I had multiple of those times where God was speaking really clear to me, and I'd feel like his presence. And it's for people to experience that. That's why I wrote the book, to experience that. That's the goal.
Yeah, where you're poured out.
Yep.
You're not going through a ritual anymore.
100%.
You're not even looking for an act for God to do something. You're just, please be with me now.
Yeah, exactly.
And, forget everything else. I just need this.
Yeah.
I need you.
Yeah.
And you just get poured out. You have a word for somebody you were praying today.
Yeah, I did.
So you had your quiet time. You're going through this. And
thinking about this time today.
And what did you get?
I feel like there's a girl either watching or her parents are watching. Her name's Emily, and she's 12 years old, and she's in it. She's in the panic, in the depression, whatever it is. And the word is obviously identifying that there's a girl, Emily, who's 12, watching this, but there's a reason, and it's not God doing it to her at all. But there's an assignment that she has for her life. She is gaining what she needs right now, the authority, that connection with God through this to propel her into her destiny and what he has for her. Sometimes when we don't get immediate breakthrough, God is training us for battle, and I feel like Emily's being trained for battle, whoever Emily is. She's 12. And then also there's Daniel and David are going through it, and God's with you. You're going to get through this. And I think the biggest thing is this is not your end. Daniel and David, this is not going to be your future. You're going to get through this. And then Nathaniel, 45, same thing for you. You're in it deep, but God's going to get you out of this. And with all these words, it's a testimony to other people. Like it's what we're doing. We climb the hill, we reach down, and we help others come up. And so.
All right. If you're watching and you're wondering, why would God let something happen to a 12-year-old? Well, the answer is found in Scripture. David was schooled in the wilderness. He was knocking off lions and bears in the wilderness at age 12. He was anointed to be king at age 14. He fought Goliath at age 15. So if God's preparing you for a lifetime of service to Him, lifetime for His glory, pay attention to it. If you want more of Brian's story, check out his book, When God Becomes Real. Copies are available nationwide. And if you're struggling with anxiety, we have a free pamphlet for you. It's called Overcoming Anxiety. It's yours for free. All you have to do is call us.